All right, howdy, folks. I'm Jeff Gonzalez, host of the Bulletproof Workshop, powered by AR15.com. Welcome to podcast 005. I am on the hunt to learn how best to optimize my performance, be it in the gym, on the range, or even in my nutrition. I'm always looking for every way to glean every little bit that I can possibly do to keep leaning forward. My next guest has been performing at peak levels all his life, and has, through the crucible of conflict, began a journey of improvement through performance, recovery, and nutrition. Please welcome to the show Kyle Kingsbury, collegiate football player, UFC fighter, and fellow podcaster. Kyle, welcome to the show, man.
Hell yeah, Jeff. It's so good to be here with you, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you taking the time. Speaking of time, let's take a short moment here to thank our sponsors.
Daniel Defense advocates for individuals' rights to bear arms, which is why they manufacture 100% American-made high-quality firearms backed with a lifetime warranty. To learn more, visit DanielDefense.com.
All right, so first of all, Kyle, we've known each other for a while, so this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this. Is like the cap of my week, so I'm totally stoked. But even though I might know a little bit about you, why don't we start with the beginning? Like, where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, I grew up in the Silicon Valley, Sunnyvale, which is funny. I thought Sunnyvale is like 120,000 people.
Yeah.
Just outside of San Jose. That was like super small town.
Yeah.
Cupertino, 50,000 people.
Cupertino,
that's where Apple is,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So that was like ultra small town vibes for me. And then, we are building the ranch out in Lockhart now.
Now you know what
like
small is.
12,000. Yeah, driving through the Texas Panhandle, like 500 people. I'm like, oh, that's small town. Okay, never mind. But yeah, I had got into football from age 10. Working class parents. Both my parents were in sales, that kind of thing. Kind of had swings, peaks and valleys of when we had money, when we didn't. They were both working 100% commission. That caused a lot of stress in the house.
Yeah, for sure.
Parents ended up getting divorced at 13. And, I fought a lot growing up. It was just like I acted out in school.
Imagine
that. And I always loved fighting. It's funny because you talk about peak performance, flow states, things like that.
Yes.
I had no word for it then. But at the time, the thing that was addictive to me about street fights was that everything went quiet. Like the whole world was gone. I was 100% present. Like it was my way to enter the Eckhart Tolle moment,
Dude.
And win or lose or even run. I mean, I've run from more people than I stood my ground with, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But in each of those circumstances, that was like peak aliveness, And so getting into college, my goal was to play pro like most people.
Yeah.
And, when I was sitting the bench at ASU my last 2 years, I was realizing like this is fucking over. There's no chance of going pro. I knew guys that had started all 4 years that didn't go pro. It's just a bigger jump, right?
Absolutely.
And that was a really, really tough pill for me to swallow. I had played around with all the party drugs at ASU. Mental health was not in check. Not getting enough sleep. Any of the corner foundational pieces
for sure
that I rely upon and teach now. I had none of that. So I really went through a pretty dark, like the most depressed time of my life when football ended. And had never really put much thought into fighting professionally, but I knew I wanted to train. I knew what I was missing. I was missing camaraderie. I was missing teammates to push me along. I felt like going to 24-hour fitness, like I was just jerking off.
For sure.
I'm there by myself.
Right.
Compare that to ASU. You've got 100 guys in the room. They're all screaming for you. You got 2 guys that are coaching in the NFL right now on either side of you screaming in your ear.
Shit.
It's a different experience,
Fuck.
So I got into training martial arts maybe a year and a half coming out of that depression after football.
Well, let me ask you something. Now that you have so much knowledge in that, like nutrition, recovery, and performance, do you think that was missing and the reason why you may not have made it to the pros?
No doubt. I mean, there's no doubt there.
Okay.
There's no doubt. And the truth is, though, from a football standpoint, there are levels, and while I was in the game, it was like, Coach Cutter, I'm a walk-on, so that's why I'm not getting my due.
Yeah.
Or I'm better than this guy. That's why I'm not getting my due. And 10 years, 20 years after the fact, I can look back and say there were guys significantly better than me that were starting.
Nice.
Most of them did go pro. We had quite a few starting D linemen go pro.
Well, ASU is a pipeline in a sense.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys.
Yeah. So it wasn't like, oh man, if I had just done X, Y, and Z, but that was a precursor because I knew some of those missing elements in my game, and getting into MMA late, I didn't have Olympic level wrestling like Daniel Cormier or, Kane, who's my brother, praying for him big time right now. He, I think he took 5th at NCAA's his senior year and had an unbelievable motor. Like no one could ever get Kane tired. So he had these natural gifts and the background. I didn't have that. Football didn't translate perfectly well to fighting.
Interesting.
So,
it's completely different kind of, even though you are fighting, it's a different level of fighting.
The athleticism transferred, but, the technique and the skill sets, I had to learn that all for the first time. And knowing that kind of lit a fire under my ass to want to learn more about recovery, food, and all these things, because really that's where I thought like I could make up the ground. And, to my surprise, learning that stuff and actually seeing how that panned out in the greatest test of all time, one of the greatest tests in the cage, that was all the proof that I needed. And
Which one was that?
Well, just like trying out stuff. Like I was introduced, my strength coach introduced me to Paul Chek early on.
Okay. I thought you meant like there was a fight that you had that was like the tipping point.
They're all the tipping point, right? Every fight in a fighter's career is the most important.
Gotcha.
Doesn't matter if you're on a 4-fight win streak, working your way in the top 10, or if you're on your, on your last leg. That is the most important fight of your life.
Because this is all stuff that as a fan, as a huge fan, you're just watching it from the outside, and there's like just understanding now more and more as I hang out with guys like you, guys like Tim, it's not just dedication. It's just like the work that you got to put in. It's amazing to see the level that it's at now. Like, dude, man. I'm glad it wasn't around when I was younger. That would have been like, oh my God, I don't want. Yeah. All right. So I didn't mean to interrupt. So please continue.
Yeah. Just trying this stuff on, I got introduced to Paul Chek's work. He asked me if I'd read a book, and I was like, fuck you. I'm not reading a book. I'm done. I'm done with college. I'm never reading again, And he's like, all right, well, watch this tape I got on VHS. And it was a flatten your abs forever video. And I was like, hell yeah, man. I want to be shredded. I'm thinking just pure aesthetics. And I watched the video, and of course, that's like the rope in for all the meatheads that want to look lean. It's all on gut health. It's all on soil health. It's all on the microbiome and how food, impacts inflammation and all this shit. As I watch it, I digest it all. I'm like, holy shit. All right, I'll try this elimination diet. Figured out I had some intolerances, and the changes that I made were night and day, and I was like, wow, my recovery is infinitely better. My energy's better. I can go to 2 or 3 workouts a day and not feel as beat up as I did before. Wow. So, testing that even in camp, before the fight happens was like, okay, this can make, if just food can make this big of a difference, what can, sauna, ice bath, what can mobility with Dr. Kelly Starrett, what can all of these things change in my day-to-day? And so that really was a performance-based education that I continued on throughout my entire fight career. And then post-fighting really took a deep dive into healing the brain. I had TBI. I don't know if I had CTE, but obviously there's been quite a few dings from starting football at 10 years old. And Pop Warner was a different game then. We had calisthenics coaches from the Marines that had us grab grass and butt heads helmet to helmet, and it was eyebrow to eyebrow. It wasn't spearing.
Nice.
But it was like, there's part of your warm-up. Just smash each other for a while and get your neck used to hitting. They don't do that shit anymore.
Yeah, probably not. Oh, my God. And that was, 10 years old?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Well, that's one of the reasons why it's where it is now, I suppose. Did you think – so I had a question about your it had to do with the UFC. Like, when you started really – dialing in your nutrition, because I've struggled with nutrition, man. I can't wait to talk more about it and get deep into that. Like the thing that you mentioned the inflammatory stuff, the anti-inflammatory for your nutrition. I imagine that, training, you're just like, whether it's pounding, whether it's just, all the stuff, that inflammation that is a result of that that intensity, the anti-inflammation of your nutrition, is that what you're talking about? Like kind of balancing things out?
Yeah, the way I like to look at it is like, if you've got you've got all the dope gear here, you've got the Roadcaster and all that stuff, and there's a bunch of different knobs.
Yeah.
There's individual mic volume, individual mic gain, and then you've got your master volume. Yeah. Right. So if you think of inflammation as master volume within the body for pain, and then you've got individual stuff from the football volume, the MMA volume, the food volume, the emotional stress volume of work or the big fight coming up.
Great analogy.
All those, Chek uses like 6 big funnels, and all those funnels funnel to one big funnel. whereas you have systemic stress, systemic inflammation.
Interesting.
And so anything acute is great, right? We have hormetic stressors, things like that.
Yeah.
Hanging out in a sauna for 20 minutes at 180 degrees is really good for you. Doing that all day long is not good for you, right? So anything that moves from acute into chronic becomes an issue. And most people don't realize, including myself at that time, that if you're eating like shit, that's a chronic stressor. That is a chronic inflammation that's going into your body. And you know, a lot of people think, if I just supplement with fish oil or some turmeric, then I'm going to fucking get rid of this, Jersey Mike's that I just ate.
This little pill is going to solve all my problems, right?
Yeah. But really, eating in a way that's right for you, and we're all individuals, requires some study, requires some self-investigation. And then when you have that, you're actually turning the master volume down on pain in the body. Now, every little ticky-tack thing that comes up, I check a kick shin to shin, get my neck cranked by a purple belt, whatever the case is, my response to that is going to be less painful than if I already had this dog shit food in my body, or I wasn't sleeping enough, or I'm in an argument with my wife.
Right.
All of those things contribute.
Damn, man. All right, so you've learned all of this in your UFC career, and you took that learning, that journey, if you will, and then you took it to like a new level, a whole new level. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, there was a couple of factors in there. One, I had, when football ended, I didn't, I had all the bad drugs, so there was nothing beneficial about that. Nothing that was illuminating or nothing really helped me see from a bird's eye view. And then in fighting, contrasting that, I had a boxing coach who was a Native American and Mayan elder named Huitzi, which Huitzilin is the Mayan name for the hummingbird.
No shit.
And he was a tiny little guy. He fought at like 103.
What?
And but yeah, like a hummingbird, he could move in and out, up and down, left and right, all directions really quickly.
Dude, that's so cool.
And he'd bring me out to the Native American reservation near us for sweat lodges, temazcals, things like that. He'd bring Kane, a lot of the other guys out there. And after a couple of years of doing that, I asked him, about La Medicina, and he just burst out laughing. And so he's introduced me to plant medicines, which really made the transition from fighting compared to football night and day different. When I left fighting, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was still living in my mom's garage. I'd been living with my mom's garage for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
While fighting in the UFC.
Holy shit.
And really struggling. And I worked part-time at a strip club, bouncing and bartending and managing it. It was a grind.
Yeah,
and,
no doubt.
No pun intended. but I still had that job twice a week, and it paid us enough cash. It was low overhead living in mom's garage. I couldn't afford a place to live in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah, for sure.
And
who really can?
Yeah, no doubt. And really the benefit of the doorway that was open for me from those plants was that I didn't have to have it figured out. All I had to do was trust. And when I asked questions, in those ceremonies, what should I do next? It was just follow your desire. And I still had a desire to learn. So,
Okay.
I'd read for the first 5 hours of a shift.
Wait a minute. You're reading?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd read. I'd work a 10, 11-hour shift at the bar. And until it got busy, the first 5 or 6 hours, I'd just be flying through books on nutrition, books on meditation, books on anything I get my hands on that really lit a fire under me. And I didn't know what I was going to do with that information. There was no real job for it. Then I went on Rogan's in 2015, and he was like, "Hey man, you need to start a podcast," like he tells a lot of people. And that was like, So I didn't do it right away, but maybe 8 months or a year later, I started, and now I could see all of this useful information that I had field tested really come to fruition.
Yes.
And I could have a place to really broadcast that information and share it. And that led me into podcasting. Podcasting led me to Paleo FX in Austin.
Nice.
Where I got to meet Aubrey Marcus, and we shared the same flight back to Vegas. I just moved there for only about 4 months. And, we traded war stories for 3+ hours. We talked fighting, fasting, plant medicines, everything in between. And he's like, "Dude, you got to come. You got to move to Austin. I'm going to hire you at On It. I'll make your own position. You can take over the On It podcast." And, the rest is history. We went to Burning Man, my wife and I with him, and it was like, all right, this is the interview.
This is the interview at Burning Man.
Yeah, we're in.
So you move to Austin, you start podcasting full time or as your main kind of thing. When you started that podcast, was it focused on peak performance? Did you have like a specific idea about what you wanted to do with the podcast, or?
Yeah. So I had, my podcast, I can't even remember the damn name now. It was just some,
With Kyle.
Corny ass name. Yeah, with Kyle. That actually would have been better, I think. But yeah, it really was performance, longevity, which I was switching over into, and cognitive function and things like that. And, taking over for On It, that was the Total Human Optimization podcast, and that's really what On It's all about, right?
Yeah.
So that transition wasn't hard at all. It was a 1-for-1 damn near.
Awesome.
And apples to apples. And, but over the years, being a fan of Aubrey's and Rogan's and loving their flexibility, I really started to expand my awareness of what is total human optimization.
Okay.
I've been mainly focused on the physical,
Makes sense. Yeah,
strength and conditioning,
I can see that.
speed work, those kind of things, killer endurance, mobility, yoga, those kind of things, and food and how that impacts its sleep. And then it was like, well, what does mental emotional optimization look like? What does relationship optimization look like? What does sex optimization look like? All those things are total human optimization. What is spiritual optimization? Where you don't fear God,
Right.
like what does that look like when you have a deeper relationship and understanding of the internal workings of yourself? And, that led to the expansion. And at a certain point, I don't know if I had outgrown that podcast, but, Aubrey stepped down as CEO, and then it became ultra corporate for me. And I was like, man, I've never had a boss before. I mean, you could call Dana White a boss, but I didn't look at him as my boss.
Right.
And Aubrey was, he's my best friend to this day. So with him gone, it was like, yeah, I'm going to step down too. And at that point, Aubrey had started a company called Fit for Service, where it really was everything we've been teaching and podcasting about. Let's actually do it with people. Let's actually walk them through the rites of passage. Let's do the sweat lodge. Let's do, the deep breath work, the Stanislav Grof holotropic breath work, where it is an altered state. It's a legal way to enter an altered state. And ecstatic dance and just shit that makes people feel weird, and like let's push those boundaries so that people can fully express themselves and feel what that feels like. And so this is our 4th year now. So between the podcast, that, and coaching people, that's pretty much full time. Obviously, having 2 kids and a wife is amazing. Like there's many full time hats that I wear, but that was the final transition and brings us up to where we're at today.
Dude. Well, okay. So first of all, there were like 3 things that you said in there that I want to deep dive on. One of them was longevity. I'm starting to get up there in the years, and I am looking for, I would say I'm looking to try and stay in the game longer, at the game that I want for myself. And, the mileage is adding up. And there's like a lot of things that I'm starting to consider that I might not have considered like 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. I'm like, okay, like back then I could get away with it because I was, young, athletic, somewhat less damaged than I am now. So it was, maybe false hope to think that back then. But now I'm like, okay, yep, I can't just like forego things now. I have to put more effort into, staying in the game as long as I can. And, I've been like you back then, I've been starting to explore options, read things. I do a lot more things that I didn't do 1 year ago now, just because, the wear and tear on the body is starting to add up. So let's talk about longevity. What are some of the secrets that you have unlocked on that?
Yeah, we can break that down from a number of ways, but the first 2 that are popping up are probably the most important in my mind when I think about this, like our relationship to food, and specifically carbohydrate tolerance, metabolic flexibility, is probably number 1. Number 2, how we correct a lifetime of injury and immobility from repetitive stress injury, things like that. Because ultimately, you're as strong as your weakest chain in the link, right?
Yeah.
And the weakest link in the chain. And so if I've got chronically tight hips from sitting in a car, from sitting during the podcast, from sitting on an airplane, from sitting on my couch or at the dinner table, that's going to start to shorten certain fascia and tendon and ligaments in my body and lengthen others.
Yeah.
Right? That can lead to injury, right? Where you're like, why doesn't my knee work? Well, it's actually my hip.
Dude,
or it's my low back, or
like
it's my psoas.
It's like you're reading me right now. It's like you're reading into my body.
I'm reading into most people.
There
right?
you go.
And they say sitting is the new smoking. I don't know if it's the new smoking, but it's certainly it's a big deal, because we don't think of how humans used to interact with the ground, right? Aaron Alexander's a good buddy of mine. most people in third world countries, as you've noticed, can still get into a full squat in their old age, right? I couldn't fucking do that to save my life. A lot of people sit on floor mats. You know, if you go to Thailand, you go to these other countries, Japan, it's floor seating, right? So they're getting up and down off the ground. Their hips are opened up in a way, you know, if you're sitting in half lotus or at least, you know, even Indian style. And I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it these days, but
it is good enough
people
for us.
know what I'm saying right now for the visual. That form of sitting is infinitely better than chairs and desks and things like that. And it's
you hear that, Paul? We need to change our studio out now.
Well, I'll tell you this, though. You know, Mark Bell's a buddy, and he has a standing desk for his podcast. I'd much rather fucking sit. You know,
really? Okay,
I want to relax. Don't fucking worry about it.
Okay, good.
Just counter it, right? So there's a counter to that. And Dr. Kelly Starrett's work really comes to mind. He wrote the book Becoming a Supple Leopard. He also wrote Ready to Run, which is fantastic. It's a must-read for runners. And, you know, one of his things, you can just pop it up on YouTube, is the super couch stretch. It's one of the easiest ways to unlock the hip flexor, the quad, the psoas, your whole anterior front chain.
Yeah.
Which, if that's chronically tight, is going to lead to low back pain. It's going to lead to you throwing your back out, you know, while you pick up groceries. It's going to, and I'm speaking from experience when I say this. Like, you can either choose to put 2 to 3 minutes in on each side a day, so 4 to 6 minutes, or you can throw your back out picking up yarn off the ground.
Yarn. You know, and that's one of the things too that I've tried to do for myself is I dedicate time daily to myself, and I try to like flex on what that's going to be. Maybe today it's going to be mobility work. Maybe tomorrow it'll be reading. Maybe, you know, so but I make it a directive for myself to try to do that. And I probably need to make as a directive, no, I need to do daily mobility. Not just whenever I feel like it. I need to do daily mobility. And man, I'll tell you what, I have, my hip flexors are so damn tight, I can fucking bounce coins off of them. You know, it's just like, oh, and you know, I don't know when that happened, but yeah, I started to take on more of like a domestic posture that you might see today on keyboards and laptops.
We're all forward. Think of where your steering wheel
driving,
is, your cell
all the
phone,
commuting.
your keyboard, all that's right in front of you. Jiu-jitsu, you know, like you're on your ass.
Yeah.
Everything you're playing with is in front of you. MMA, everything's in front of you.
Yeah. So I feel like I have, you know, and it sounds like the rest of, or a large majority of people have also done the same thing, which is created this monster of sorts. And so mobility is going to be a key thing that I try to work on. I definitely will. And I love Kelly. He, you know, like I said, he was, for me at least, he was a resource that wasn't available, you know, like 10 years ago. And that he puts it all out there for the public, you know, either through the book or through all of his videos.
Yeah, he's got thousands of free videos, thousands.
I mean, it's crazy. It's like that's all open to the public. So there's like no excuse to not do it. Well, I suppose there is an excuse. You just don't want to do the work, you know, to do something simple as do research and look up, hey, couch stretch, Kelly Starrett, what does it mean? How does it work? How do I do it? Blah, blah, blah. All right, so the mobility aspect, check. Going to try to work on that one. That'll be a big thing. I feel like, too, man, because, like, I feel like every now and then I'll do some good mobility work, and I'm like, it's like freedom. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, wow, you know, I feel good. And I know better because, obviously, consistency is the key. I get comfortable with, okay, I did it for 2 or 3 days. I feel great. And then all of a sudden I just make up excuses not to do it again or not to keep that consistent process going. And everybody makes excuses about like life, business, that family relationships, stuff like that. But what was it? You said 3 minutes on each side, 6 minutes total?
Yeah, 2 to 3 minutes each side.
You know, that's about how much time, you know, I mean, that's like scrolling on Instagram and you're done, you know, just.
Yeah, we got longer dumps than that sometimes, right?
So like, true, absolutely. Sure I could easily do that. I'm like, okay, we're going to cut this one off and we're going to go down over there and we're going to do some work. All right, so mobility is a big one. You started to go down your second one.
Metabolic flexibility.
What
you know,
is
so
that?
So really it's our body's ability to burn fat for fuel as well as carbohydrates. And for most people, you know, and I want to be clear here, you know, there's a lot. I jumped on the bandwagon of the ketogenic diet early on in 2014. And I shouldn't say early on. It's been around for over 100 years. But in its recent surge with guys like Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, who works with a lot of the SEALs out in Florida. A lot of his research came online on Tim Ferriss's podcast in 2014.
Oh, shit.
Dr. Peter Attia was talking about fasting. Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who's been a regular on Rogan's podcast, Then this guy, Dr. Walter Longo, who's an Italian guy who wanted to bridge the gap for people who had never done a water fast.
Right.
Like, all right, there's a large percentage of people that will think that's too extreme, or maybe they need medical
Absolutely.
attention to just go straight to water for 4 or 5 days. Can we give them the microdose of that experience with still, 80% of the gains? And so what he calls the fasting mimicking diet is something that he coined a while back. Now, he kind of bastardized it, in my opinion, because he made it prescription only, and it's like $400 worth of inorganic shit food that you got to buy. But originally, they did this shake, and we just retooled it. I just retooled the shake to make it more ketogenic and all organic, and I can give the recipe if you want. But what we're finding is that, what he found was, even with his shit ingredients, that people had about 80% of the benefits for 6 to 12 months after they finished this fast, meaning systemic inflammation went down. Hemoglobin A1C went down, which is your 3 to 6 month snapshot of how you process blood sugar. And if that's elevated, you're on the road to type 2 diabetes, or you're on the road to type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, right? And they're calling it that now because it is a blood sugar intolerance issue.
Really?
So we can reset our metabolism. We can reset our, the master control of our inflammation. We can reset our ability to burn fat for fuel, which for the longest time humans had. You could argue against the ability to eat a high-fat diet year-round. Most people didn't do that.
Right.
Unless you're, an Inuit. Like, you probably didn't live on whale blubber and seal blubber, right?
Exactly.
And I don't know many people that did. But at least periodically, a lot of our ancestors went without food periodically because we didn't have shipping containers and fucking refrigeration or preservatives, you know? So when you consider that humans evolved to go without, and that actually has enormous health benefits, then we can choose, all right, once a year in January, I'm going to do this fast. And for 6 to 12 months afterwards, I'm going to see a huge benefit. And there's ways we can figure this out for ourselves. So one of the other key things here is you can do metabolic typing. You can do a number of different things to see, like, how do I process carbohydrates? How do I, based on feel? And it's fairly accurate, and it's a great resource. But now they have a number of companies out there that produce a product called a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. Ooh. So, diabetics do the finger prick.
Right.
Postprandial blood glucose should be under 120 2 hours after you eat. That doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't tell you what happened the moment that food hits your mouth. It doesn't tell you what happened at an hour and a half, at 3 hours. So the continuous glucose monitor just goes in the back of your arm. And these used to be pretty expensive. Dexcom made them. You had to have diabetes to get one. They were $1,000 a piece. Oof. Now they're significantly cheaper. A company I like is called NutriSense. They sell them. Levels is another good company. And, they have like a standing order, so you get the prescription. It's a little workaround,
nice.
with the legal system.
Nice.
But they send that out, and then you just tap your phone to it, and it shows you in real time what is this food doing in your body to you specifically. So, I've had genetics tested. I've done, I was the guinea pig on it, right? So I explored all the bullshit. What's the latest tech? What's the latest gear? What's the latest fad? And truthfully, there's nothing like this because it takes all guesswork out. What does, what does a cup of white rice do? Cool. What does a plate of white rice do when I actually go eat Thai food and I want to have a fucking massive portion of white rice with some pad Thai?
I love it.
Like
love
more
what I'm hearing.
White rice noodles. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's see what that meal does to me. And I got some pretty cool N=1 data on myself because I had done a couple 5-day water fasts. I had done a fasting mimicking diet, but the final one I had done was in 2018. Then I got set up with one of these CGMs, and I saw that a lot of carbohydrates, this is a couple years after my latest fast, so long past the window of benefit.
Got it.
But I saw that a lot of my numbers looked pre-diabetic. There were some meals I had where I'd shoot up to like 175 blood sugar, which is way out of range, even for a healthy guy.
Dude.
And I did another fasting mimicking diet, and 3 months later to get my blood work done, it's never looked better. Everything's improved top to bottom.
Really?
And in addition to that, I run the CGM back, and everything I was eating before I could eat now, and I'd return to completely normal levels. I had 3 almond butter and jelly sandwiches, 3 of them, just to be an asshole. and I had a 123 blood sugar score at peak.
So because the workup towards where you were at that helped create some sort of homeostasis in your body, gave you I don't want to say the ability to splurge, but the splurge in your case had minimal effect.
Yeah, and it's not going to be that way for everybody.
Sure.
But I do have,
blows me away.
My genetics, my wife's genetics, Aubrey's genetics, they're all oddly similar in that we have the same polymorphisms for type 2 diabetes, increased risk of obesity. None of us, you look at all three of us, we're all lean, we're all healthy. Genetics is not a death sentence. That's the way it can express if you're not flipping the right on-off switches on your epigenetics.
Yes.
That's where lifestyle comes into play.
For sure.
How much sunlight you're getting. Are you moving?
Dude.
What's your stress level? What kind of food do you put in your body? And, the key on this blood sugar piece, though, that I want to make clear is there's a lot of healthy foods that we know are healthy, but they're not healthy for us. Or, one man's medicine is another man's poison based on dose, right? So I can get away with the bitter white rice. If I have a plate of white rice and I haven't fasted in a while, it's going to be a problem.
Gotcha.
So all this is just more data points on what's right for me. And that's the ultimate thing, because it shits on every argument around diet known to man, other than go without carbohydrates, at least in periodically, right? So 3-week ketogenic reset diet by Mark Sisson, that works. Doing a fasting mimicking diet or a water fast for 4 days, once per quarter at maximum, or at least once per year at minimum, that can have a profound benefit for every aspect of how you show up in the world.
I have tried. I've tried a fasting. It wasn't a water fasting. I figured I would kind of tiptoe into this because I didn't know what to expect, and I had concerns that I'm still training, I'm still traveling, I'm still trying to do all this stuff. So I'm I'm a little nervous. So I kind of tiptoed into it, and I was surprised. Because I did try to do it every 4 months. So 3 times a year I did this. And it was it was from Friday to Monday. And what I was really surprised by was the first time I did it, I felt terrible. I mean, I'm going back to buds. Just do it until Monday. Just do it until Monday. Just kept mentally telling myself that. The second time I did it on Saturday afternoon, I didn't feel bad anymore. I mean, could I eat? Sure, I could have eaten, but I didn't feel bad. And the third time I did it, I had a similar effect. It didn't, for whatever reason, the second time I did it was special, I guess, because the third time I did it, it felt the same, but I guess I had in my head oh, it's going to be even better now, So I think I kind of plateaued, and that's my plateau. That's where I'm going to be. That's how I'm going to feel. It's going to be Saturday afternoon. I'm going to feel like this until Monday when I eat. And it was really interesting. Because the other thing that I noticed was I had energy. And that's what really blew me away. I thought for sure, and I share this with the audience because you talk fasting, and a lot of times people have they conjure up negative emotions with that. But my energy levels were not down. They weren't, maybe I wouldn't go and do a marathon, but my energy levels were more than adequate for all the daily activities that I need to do, even working out, which blew me away too. I decided to push the limit. I'm all right, let's see if I can get in the gym and do a normal high-intensity workout and see how I feel. And, dude, I was really blown away by how I felt, my energy level, and my capacity to actually work. Totally, if you had told me that I would feel that way, I would have said, bullshit. Having to experience it myself was the game changer.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I remember when Dom went on Tim Ferriss's podcast, he talked about doing, and of course, this guy was well keto adapted, and he's a powerhouse. He's elite level in this, researching it. And he had done a 7-day water fast. On day 7, he pulled 500 pounds off the ground 15 times and then maxed it 600, which is under his normal max. But he did this on 7-day water fast. Then he went and spoke at a fucking conference all day. So he had the mental capacity to hold that after what would kill most people physically, right? Yeah. On day 7 of a water fast. So and he's an anomaly in his own way, but that's still that, whatever that 80% of your max is kind of thing for us. We still have access to that. So a couple of misnomers are if you fast, you're going to waste muscle. All the bros say that, right?
Yeah,
you're
going to lose muscle mass.
Yeah, if you want 13-inch arms, then you should fast, that kind of thing. And the truth is, every anti-catabolic hormone kicks off. you get testosterone increase, IGF-1 increase, growth hormone increase. All these things are there to preserve you, right? If that tanked when you were fasting, that genetics line is gone.
Yeah.
It's long gone.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
have lasted through the winter.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
The ones who were able to survive and pass their genes on were ones that did fairly well, right? So that's that transfer. So the other thing that you talked about is around day 2 or day 3, your body will switch to fat for fuel. And the second that happens, you're like, I could eat. I'm not that hungry though. That's because you're mainlining calories.
I like
right?
that.
And that mainlining calories is in the form of ketones. And the ketones are a very efficient fuel for the brain and for the muscles. They're not going to give you high glycolytic output. So if you're thinking about doing CrossFit or something like that, it's probably not going to be as beneficial. But certainly we've seen this in endurance training, Ironman stuff. You know, a lot of these guys are working with ketones and carbohydrates as dual fuels during the races. But
interesting.
Yeah, you have energy, you have cognitive function, you have power, you have all the ability to get shit done. I don't recommend that for most people. It's like, hey, if you're going to do this, set some time aside for yourself. Like, I don't like cooking my kids food when I'm fasting. That's
right.
That's like, man, my patience wears real thin. Like, you don't want to. There's a funny story. I did this last fasting and mimicking diet and with Fit for Service, and we brought 15 people through the program where we each fasted and got a shake each day at the end of each day. And Godzi taught a lot on depth psychology from Carl Jung and dream analysis, and I went in deep into the body with mobility and all this good stuff. And I got home one day, and my wife was like, "Oh shit, I'm so sorry. I meant to get this done earlier." And I could smell it from the truck when I pulled up in the parking lot. I was like, in my driveway, I'm like, I could smell the best smells I've ever smelled. And I was like, please God, tell me that I'm just smelling leftover, like that it's gone already. And I went in there, and this is day 3, right? I was feeling pretty good. I get in there, out of the oven, she pulls out a 5-pound tenderloin roast and Yukon Gold potatoes cut into quarters, dusted in duck fat and sea salt. I was like, oh my God, it's my favorite meal.
Right now. Like, I'm hungry now.
It was so bad. It was so bad.
You feel like a vampire walking among the humans, you're just like, I cannot feed. I cannot feed. Oh my God. That must have been rough.
It was. It's funny how many people were like, I can't believe you didn't eat. And I was like, if I ate that night and tried to show up the next day acting like I had fasted, I'd have to fucking quit my job. Like,
that's a good point.
The amount of hypocrisy.
Yeah, exactly.
And to hold all them to that.
Yes.
Come on.
Well, that's interesting too, because I was surprised at how sensitive, maybe not sensitive is not the right word, but how receptive I was in my olfactories. Like, it was like, I can smell shit now. Like, I mean, I always had, like, I could tell, like, different ingredients in food. Like, I can kind of smell that a little bit. But, dude, man, by the time that I was ready to start making my meal after coming out of the fast, and the aromas just started filtering in, I was like, it was like almost like intoxicating in some cases. Like, especially like bacon. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, it's funny. People talk about like why our noses don't work as well as they used to, and there's cologne, there's the smell of sewage, there's all these things that kind of dumb down that response to the brain, where our brain's like, sewage, cologne, or deodorant, whatever, and hyper palatable foods, right? Those kind of things. But I think it is being so well fed year round. Like before my first fast, I had never missed a meal, thank God. I had never missed refined carbohydrates in a meal, right? So we're talking cereal, bread, some refined carbohydrates, some processed food at every single meal for 30 plus years.
Holy shit.
So my body never went back to that, but that was still there. It's still buried in our DNA.
Got it.
To be able to do that thing. There was my first 5-day water fast. I actually did it working at the strip club.
What?
And one of the girls walked in, and in her bag, she had a bag of Doritos. And she got about 10 yards ahead of me, and I looked at her and I said, "You got Doritos in there?" And she goes, "Oh my God." And I was like, "Yes, I knew it. Cool Ranch." And she pulled the blue bag out.
Blue bag.
Right? So, hunters do this. A lot of the guys that Rogan hunts with, the extreme dudes, they'll fast the entire time they hunt because it tunes them in.
Holy shit, that
right?
makes a
Not
lot
just
of
to the
sense.
smell, but the heightened awareness, the heightened senses is all coming back online now.
Dude, like I remember hearing stories from the guys that were the team guys that were in Vietnam. And before they go out on ops, because they were moving through the jungle, and the jungle is like it's a ecoclimate of itself. They would the guys that were like point men and were leading the patrol through there, maybe not all of them, but the ones that I would talk to that I paid attention to, they wouldn't eat before they'd go out, which blew me away. Because like at the time, I'm like, I have to have energy. I have to have fuel to be able to operate, you know? And the reason why they wouldn't was because they would be able to smell the VC in the jungle better and they were worried that they were emanating odors as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they would like cut out and then they'd hit everybody else wouldn't, but they would. And they put them at because they were trying to, again, optimize their performance in the field, because at that point they're playing for real. If they got the jump on them because they got a whiff of them coming down the trail, they could set up their ambush, or they could, just fade away and not get caught in an ambush. So this is awesome to hear, man. I mean, dude, I'm like tripping on some of this stuff just because I observed it, but I only observed it probably because, I guess maybe because it was so powerful is not the right word, but just pungent that's a perfect word for that.
Mm-hmm,
Perfect word for olfactory.
Pungent.
All right, so I'm loving this. This is awesome because I've been such a trial and error kind of guy, and I'm sure I fit the bill for a lot of folks that are playing with nutrition. Trial and error. You read something, you try it, maybe it didn't work, maybe you didn't give it enough time to work, or maybe you just had preconceived notions. Oh, fuck it, I'm not gonna do this because it doesn't fit my lifestyle, whatever. And it's funny because we found out the hard way that our kids were super susceptible to artificial food coloring, artificial flavors when they were much younger. And so by direction of our doctor, they said that we should have, they suggested a Feingold diet, which it was basically an elimination diet. You basically eliminate all of the things that are normally kept in an American household with kids.
Pretty much everything in the pantry.
Exactly.
For the most part.
Pretty much everything. And even, fruits and vegetables were also things that we had to eventually kind of go through because they were just so susceptible to it. And that was my first exposure to an elimination type diet. And we did it, and then they grew out of it, I suppose, or they just reached the point where they pushed back enough that it was just too hard.
Yeah.
But that was my first exposure to an elimination type diet. I didn't think about it for myself. We, of course, if you're in the household, it's much easier to be on the same sheet with everybody than try to be your own.
That's such in personal training, for a while back when I was fighting, that was the number one issue was you take a fat husband who has a large wife and he's willing to do the changes, but she's still making food for the whole house and making the kids French toast. Like if it's right there, I mean, that is the ultimate test. And most people don't yet have the willpower because they don't have the momentum of heading in the right direction.
I love that that forward momentum, leaning forward all the time. Terrible time to take a drink. I'm sorry. That was a terrible time. Terrible time. So we're at a point now in our discussion where we're talking about getting the nutrition dialed in. And, what I heard from you, I'm paraphrasing, was that the processed foods are never going to be useful at truly trying to optimize your performance. They're there as a filler, but they're not what you need to get to that peak level of performance. So you talked a little bit about what you are doing, but what should I stop doing to try to get to where you are?
Right. Well, the three pieces would be really, if it's the more alive the food is, the better. Right. That's it right there. Right? Yeah. So if you've got, if you hunted something, that's going to be probably top of the heap. But you pick up fresh, never been frozen meat before. That's grass-fed, grass-finished. Regenerative agriculture. That's good for the soil, good for you, good for your body. And then figuring out which carbohydrates set you off. Because I can tell you sweet potatoes are great. Blackberries are great, but they're great for me.
Right.
Right? It might be, Rob Wolf talks a lot about this in Wired to Eat. The differences between him and his wife. His wife can eat bananas like nothing. It doesn't impact her. 3 bananas, no impact. He has a half a banana, his blood sugar skyrockets. So these individual pieces there.
And I can't wait to get that monitor.
Yeah.
As soon as we're done here, I'm ordering one.
You'll learn so much, and they've got, NutriSense has, you get assigned a registered dietitian. And so from the app, they will write you after every single meal and say, looks like you had too many sweet potatoes, or you looks like, the French fries blew you out, or
the honey bun, not good.
Or, hey, the steak salad was awesome, or the steak salad was shit. What kind of dressing did you use? You know what I'm saying? So like there's all these little touch points, and it's super important. Like people have this idea that they're going to try to get the best score. And it's like, for the first couple of weeks, fuck off. Right? Like eat the shit you normally put in your body and see what that response is, right? So you just want data points. And then for the last 2 weeks, or if you do it for a couple of months, it's even better. Maybe don't fuck off for the first month, but for a couple of weeks, eat the foods that you've always been eating, and then start to work it with them on ways that you can optimize that.
I love that idea.
And by the end, you've learned so much about yourself. You'll never forget that stuff. You don't need to wear it the rest of your life. You can if you're going to experiment like I do. I'll put them on periodically, but that stuff takes all guesswork out, right? If you're not checking, you're guessing.
Dude, so first of all, anything of value is worth measuring. And like that's like a motto, a mantra that I live by. And I document my macros in an app. But there is a lot of guessing in that sense. And that doesn't give me the feedback about what that's actually doing to my body. It gives me a 1,000-foot view perhaps of what it might do to the collective. Like, okay, this is your, whatever. The idea of being able to personalize this information to me, I guess I'm an idiot. I didn't think to even consider that as an option.
Most people don't know. Most people don't. I mean, I've been tracking this stuff, but most people never even heard of a Dexcom.
Yeah.
I remember Peter Attia talking about it, and he has, he's very successful, so he could, get $1,000 Dexcoms, no problem, right? And he wore them for years. Tim Ferriss, I think, threw one on. The beautiful thing about this technology is that it continues to get cheaper, as with all things, right?
Absolutely.
Computing, all of it, cell phones. So with it more accessible and more affordable, there's no reason not to access it now. But the grand theme behind that is like, why is blood sugar important if I don't have genetics to be type 2 diabetes? No one in my family has type 2 diabetes. Elevated blood sugar is what's going to lead to most chronic diseases. And that's not something that I just, drew out of my ass. That's Dr. David Perlmutter's work in Grain Brain. Any of the books that we've seen, from Wired to Eat to the Ketogenic Reset Diet by Mark Sisson, like all these things keep circling back on how disease manifests. And it's not true across the board, but quite a few of the big ones: heart disease, stroke.
What's killing
cancers? Right?
The diseases that are killing Americans are, it sounds like, very closely related to failing to recognize how all of the stuff that we ingest is affecting our body, or torturing our body in some cases.
Yeah. So that's a really big one, and that can help control the master volume of inflammation in the body. There's some other little things you can do from there, but really understanding that, and then diving into gut health. If there is a fungal issue, if there is,
let's talk about that,
leaky gut syndrome, if there's any of these things, I forget which book I was reading, but they said that if you add it up. Yeah, it was Dr. Michael Ruscio. He wrote Healthy Book, Healthy You. He just moved to Austin, actually. He's a fantastic guy. If you were to add up all the different types of autoimmune disease and put them in one category, like they do with cancer, they don't do it with autoimmune. Autoimmune would be number one. Heart disease, stroke, cancer would all pale in comparison to autoimmune.
Really?
Right. And this has all skyrocketed in the last 15, 20 years. It's not like it's like it did happen overnight. Really, they skyrocketed in our lifetime. So understanding that and understanding the gut's role in that is super important. And, lowering systemic blood sugar and your body's response to that's going to help a lot with creating the right environment for a thriving microbiome to survive and populate. And those guys, they'll act as the police state. They're not the police state, but they'll act as good cops, right? They'll be there to police some of the bad guys like candida overgrowth, parasites, different things like that. It's their job to make sure that this is a really good functioning ecosystem within you. I've had a couple of guys on, Dr. Mahmoud Ghanoum, who wrote his thesis paper 40 plus years ago on Candida, works at the Cleveland Clinic. His son, Afif Ghanoum, they've been on a couple of times. They're awesome. Their company, Biome, BIOHM, is probably the best, most research-backed probiotic on the planet. And it contains within it, all the key players, the most studied probiotics that are beneficial, as well as Saccharomyces boulardii, which is going to help break down biofilm. So a lot of these guys, the candida and things like that, if you go on a low carbohydrate diet, you feel immediately better.
Yeah.
Right. You take away their food source.
Yeah.
But they don't just die off. They'll
Right.
create this biofilm and hibernate. And then when you go back to eating like shit, they come out of retirement and
Hey, we're back.
We're back. Now your rash is back. Now now
Yes.
your athlete's foot is back. Now your jock itch is back. Now the yeast infection comes back. Now
Holy
thrush
shit.
comes back. All this stuff is related. So pretty much just as a prophylactic, I take that. My family takes it. They've got a really good greens drink that you can mix. Kids love it. My little girl, who's about to turn 2 on 4th of July, she
Right
loves
on.
it. She's like, Daddy, green drink. Daddy, green drink. I'm like,
love
okay,
it.
honey, I'll give you a little one. So, if it passes the kids' food test, then there's no
Yeah,
reason
that
not
says
to.
a lot. That says a lot.
Yeah, but there's just little things like that you can supplement with once you've got the foundational pieces laid out. And I think the biggest foundational piece that I found is from Paul Chek. He writes about this briefly in How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, Volume 2. But he also has an ebook. It's called The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need. And the doctors are Dr. Movement. What is your movement practice? That's working out. That's yoga and mobility. It's walking. It's being in nature. It's just being your activities, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Diet. What are the foods you put in your body? And we solved one of the riddles there with blood sugar.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Quiet. That's your working in practice. Meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, and sleep.
Oh, man, we got to talk about that too.
Then you've got Dr. Happiness, and Dr. Happiness is your relationships. It's your dream. It's why you're here, your purpose in life, and how these first 3 really set the stage for you to accomplish in Dr. Happiness. If one of the first 3's off, good fucking luck.
Yeah,
If you're not sleeping, good luck realizing the dream.
Daniel Defense advocates for individuals' rights to bear arms, which is why they manufacture 100% American-made high-quality firearms backed with a lifetime warranty. To learn more, visit DanielDefense.com.
That is awesome. I love those. Those are great. Let me go back to the gut biome, because I feel like I've had an on and off kind of issue. I remember I didn't want to do it, but I had something, and it was the only choice for me to do, which was antibiotics. And like after that 7-day run of antibiotics, I might have gotten over the ailment that I was taking the antibiotics for, but I feel like that was the beginning of some serious issues that I've still had for like 2-3 years now. And so let's talk a little bit about like what really happens in the gut and why gut health is so important, because I'm still trying to figure this shit out.
Yeah.
That's like been like, of all the other things, like I can put my fingers on, like diet, nutrition, I can do that. Mobility, I can do that. But the gut health is just elusive, man. I have not been able to fix that or solve that riddle.
Yeah. Well, first let me say I'm no expert.
Well,
And second,
I'm asking for your advice because
yeah.
I'm selfish, by the way. This podcast is totally about me.
I
Go ahead.
fucking always do that. That's the beauty of podcasting,
I know, right?
These are questions I
I
want
want
to know
answers.
from me, and
Damn
y'all
it.
can listen in on it, right?
Yeah, fuck everybody else.
If you glean anything from it, cool.
Awesome.
I'm going to get mine.
Yes.
Yeah, and, I've also had experts on every side of the fence around this.
Okay.
Dr. Paul Saladino, who is the carnivore doc, says you don't need fiber, and it shows all the different ways why you don't need fiber, and shows all the benefits of eating meat nose to tail. He holds some truth in those statements. Not the complete truth, but some truth in those statements.
Gotcha.
Dr. Michael Ruscio, probably one of the best gut experts I've ever had on. He wrote Healthy Gut, Healthy You. Excellent starting place for people to deep dive through elimination and lower FODMAPs diets to really eliminate any of the problematic stuff. And sometimes it's things you wouldn't necessarily think of.
I'm sure.
That can help you. Like I think asparagus is a low carbohydrate, high fiber, high nutrient dense food, micronutrient dense, but and it helps as a diuretic. When women are having their monthly moon, it can help move that out so they don't have an extra water weight issues and things like that, bloating. But that fiber is really hard to break down, especially if you have gut dysbiosis. So there's a lot of tips in that book that I think will help set people on the right foot.
Definitely going to get that.
Typically what I've found with people who do a really low carbohydrate diet or long-term ketogenic diet is that they're not getting enough fiber, and it can change the microbiome tremendously. Now, when we say microbiome, even coming from Dr. Mahmoud Ghannoum and Afif, like we're brand new in this, right? It's like brand new into genetics. They did the Human Genome Project before and learned a lot. And then they're like, well, epigenetics actually matter quite a bit. And it's still like we're on the frontiers of learning a lot of information. But anybody who says they've got it figured out, it's like, we're not there yet.
We're still
right?
so young in this journey of sorts.
Yeah. So I think, for me and this is going to be different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
For me personally, I feel better having a decent amount of fiber in my diet. That usually comes from certain types of cruciferous. And Saladino's adamantly against cruciferous, right? He'll tell you all the reasons it's destroying you, that kind of thing. And there are certain cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts. I love them, especially like bacon, maple Brussels, things like that, roasted in a pan. Those are the shit. But that doesn't feel good. I get super gassy. Shit doesn't come out right. And that's one of the things Paul Chek points to is all this low-tech stuff you can do to analyze, to self-reflect. One of them is looking at your shit before you flush it. And it's such a weird thing to say, but he has these cool cartoons in How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy where he shows the poop lineup.
Yeah.
And there's this perfectly tall, firm, well-formed turd that's a cop.
Yep.
And he's looking at all the villains. And there's seven different types of shit, that are the bodybuilder shit that, causes pain when it comes out. There's the iceberg that's, shaped like the poop emoji.
I can't wait to see this, man.
And it's great because it's very simple when you take these questionnaires.
Sorry.
Gotcha. You're good, brother.
You did.
Get a little water.
Oh, my God.
So
I'm picturing these images in my head as we're talking
and
about
it's great.
this.
The second you read it, you're like, oh, yeah, I've had every one of these shits.
Yeah, for
At
sure.
some point, I've had every fucking one of them.
Oh, man.
And does it float? Does it sink? All of this stuff is an analysis of what your body's getting rid of.
It's waste.
So how am I processing it, right? Because if I'm processing it correctly, it should look like the cop. It should be a well-formed poop. And I'm not calling cops well-formed poop. I love cops, but I'm just saying.
But the image in the book is of like an enforcer.
Yeah, and this is really what you want. So, for all the stool tests and the microbiome tests and the colonoscopies and all these things out there, they're not going to tell you as much information as How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy will about how your body's actually processing food. And then from there, we can kind of hack the system with digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid that raises stomach acidity, things like that, and ultimately give our body the ability to break down the food that we're putting in, especially when we know that it's good for us, right? You got the blood sugar guy on, you're like, all right, I'm scoring 10s out of 10s on everything here, but I'm still not shitting right. It's likely that you need some enzymes to help. Bioptimizers is a great company. They're probably the best in the game. They're on Amazon. They're on their own website. Biome as a probiotic alongside that. That's pretty much the 1-2 punch. When taken over time, will help to restore balance in the gut. As long as you're not continuing to eat dog shit and fuel the bad guys. So
that's kind of the thing that I've also struggled with. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes and I'll go on these, highs and lows, and a lot of that. But what's interesting is you talk about the 4 doctors, and I think a lot of the highs and lows can be related to that 4th one, or maybe the 3rd one. I can't remember which one. I know the 4th one was Dr. Happy. The 3rd one, I can't remember what.
Quiet.
Dr. Quiet. Not having that kind of like I feel like that's an area that I need a lot of work in as well. I'm at that point where I need to become a little bit more self-reflective. I need to start thinking about bigger picture stuff. And so I feel like that has my stress that I'm inducing more than likely on myself is then kind of going straight down into my gut. And it's like just this big old, let me just stir this fucking pot up a little bit more with stress. So
that is something that Paul talks about, these stress buckets. And, there's a lot of people be scratching their heads like, how does mental emotional stress impact the gut? Well, even if you just look at it from a nervous system standpoint, you've got fight or flight or freeze,
exactly,
rest and digest. Rest and digest is the rhyme, right?
Yeah,
like
I love that.
So how can I be in a proper state of digestion, rest and digest, if my mind's going 100 miles an hour, right? Like people who watch, action movies while they eat their dinner, it's not the same as somebody who's eating on their back porch, watching a hummingbird and the fucking butterflies fly by, right? Yeah. It's a completely different experience for the two of them.
Interesting. That's so cool. It's funny because I can remember, and so I try to listen to my body more and more. When I'm eating and I finish a meal, there's like a period of time about 10 to 30 minutes after where if I ate a meal that I felt was a good meal, there's like no discomfort or no craziness going on down here in the gut. If I eat something, and sometimes I think it's like healthy, which is the reason why I ate it, But dude, there's a battle going on in my stomach at that point. Whatever I introduced is not being well received down there. And but it's funny because I struggle because it's listed as a quote unquote good food or something, healthy food that you're supposed to eat. And I'm just thinking, I just need to keep eating this because it's eventually going to get healthy down there. But just understanding that there are so many little things that go into all of this, and more than likely, I'm betting, because most of the stuff that I bring on myself is stress, and that stress has just a horrible way of affecting the body. It just manifests itself, or it makes things worse than they already are. It just kind of helps pour a little bit of gas on the fire and just make things, if that was a little bitty fire, let's make it a bigger fire, adding more stress. And I feel like I take a lot, like that's where my stress goes, is into my stomach, into my gut.
Yeah.
And it just man. So like I'm stoked to hear about a bunch of this stuff because I've read a few things. I'm going to definitely check out the other book that you just mentioned because I'm trying to solve that riddle. Like I feel like that's the thing that I am missing in my game plan, if you will. All right. So one of the things I also liked about your first point of the three here, you talked about basically, meats. In my good friend John Welborn says that if it doesn't have a face, it's not necessarily good for you. And I've used that forever. Like it's got to have a face. If I'm going to eat it, it's got to have a face, kind of thing. So that's one. Then of course, managing those carbs, getting those carbs, because there are good carbs, there are bad carbs. But for me, using the monitor to help figure out what those carbs are, and then gut health. Like that's like a 1, 2, 3 super, I wouldn't say simple because obviously each one of these is complex, but from a planning perspective, it seems like that's actually not that hard to do to help boost your nutrition and therefore boost your performance.
Yeah, and it requires a little investigation, right? So like, again, don't take my word for any of this stuff. Try what you're called to. For you, don't take the word of what is healthy, right?
Yes.
You're going to see that, you're going to feel it first, and you're going to see it in the toilet.
Yes.
Right? So it may take some investigating where you have, Taco Tuesday, and you're like, all right.
And
maybe
Butthurt Wednesday.
Maybe it's the corn tortillas. Let's try siete. Let's try flour. Nope, flour's out. All right, siete does good. Or maybe I can't have the tortilla. Maybe, every tortilla is fine, but it's the shredded cabbage that's fucking me up. That fucks me up. Right?
Oh,
I can have sauerkraut if it's fermented. Can't have raw cabbage. And I like raw cabbage on tacos, especially fish tacos, right? Shredded cabbage.
That's like the norm.
That fucks me up. So you may not know looking on your plate which is the culprit, but that takes some investigation. So then you try it again and you're like, oh, yep, that brought back the exact same feeling. There's no test that's necessary for that.
Yeah.
You just tested yourself.
Yeah, you just feel.
And the truth is, when the gut's out of balance, you can be allergic and have intolerances to all sorts of shit. A lot of people take these food allergy tests and they're like, oh, I'm allergic to 1,000 different things. Why is that? Well, if you have leaky gut syndrome, these unbroken down food particles are making their way into the bloodstream. Your body's going to attack that. That's going to cause autoimmune. That's going to have a cascading effect. That's no bueno. So getting that dialed in and healing the gut is going to allow you to go back to some of these problematic foods potentially that you couldn't eat before. And that's another important piece of that too. It just takes like diligence, the true authentic desire and intention to change, and then you actually walking the walk and participating in that change.
Oh, so, okay. I love that last part right there because we are such a instant gratification society that what you're asking is work. You've got to put some work in, but the problem that I had was like, I tried to get by, and eventually what happens is time adds to the equation. What might have started as small over time becomes big. And so what I try to encourage people, and I do this in my training when I'm teaching classes, I try to tell people, I'm like, listen, it's not an overnight issue. This is going to take time. You've got to invest. You've got to be committed. You've got to put the work in, and you've got to think about it from a smaller picture, like get down in there and just do one thing daily. And if you can do that for a week, and then a week turns into a month, and a month turns into a year, now you're on the right track. So the same thing here. Like for me, what I'm taking away from this conversation is that if you want to have that healthy lifestyle, number one, there's not a one-size-fit-all. You're going to have to do a little bit of self-reflection, and that's where things like the monitors and reading your poop, like the what were those?
The poop lineup.
Yeah, the poop lineup. Thank you. And then after that, taking that information and tweaking what is going to work for you. And I feel like I know enough people that come to class that pay attention, that take the information, that then go and then practice, that there's enough people hopefully listening that would do the same thing with their nutrition. Because for me, I'll be honest, one of the things that I worry about the most is the health of our society, like in general. Like when we look at like something like COVID that hit us, and it's an unpleasant truth, but healthier people managed the entire pandemic much better than unhealthy people did. And I don't want to see fellow Americans suffering unnecessarily, but unfortunately where we are as a culture, it's like, it's like give me a pill. I need it tomorrow. It has to happen on this time period for myself, and I don't want to do any work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's living in fantasy land though, right? So there's quite a few people that are asleep at the wheel living in fantasy land, and especially over the last 2.5 years, that's been something for me to really release and let go of.
Yeah.
Like needing to save everyone, needing to wake everyone up. It's like, all right, we all get to choose our level of awareness, and we get to choose our level of investigation into ourselves and the world at large. One of the things, touching on that health standpoint from COVID and any upcoming monkeypox or whatever
the next one is going to be.
I had Dan and Kara on from NutriSense on the podcast, and something they talked about was, because they had gleaned a ton of information, N=1 times thousands of people throughout the pandemic. And they had shown unequivocally that the better your metabolism was, the more metabolically flexible you were, the greater your immune system worked, the greater the gut microbiome worked, right? So all of these things flow into one another. When you look at the body as a complex organism, all things are interconnected.
Yeah.
Right? So understanding that, it was like, that's really cool. The next question is, how lean do you have to be? And what they found was that if you were 100 pounds overweight, completely metabolically inflexible, but you started practicing, eating a lower carbohydrate diet and starting to change and figure out at least which carbohydrates are right for me.
Yeah.
Maybe doing a fast or a fasting mimicking diet, that you could rapidly change your metabolic function.
Interesting.
So you're not going to lose the whole 100 pounds quickly, but you don't actually need to. You could lose 30 pounds, but become metabolically healthy on the inside.
Yeah.
And then you'd increase your chances of surviving something like that. Right. And that to me was really cool because it showed that it might only take 3 weeks to 3 months to get there if you're diligent and you're working with the right people.
And that's a big thing. I mean, that's like huge. I mean, we're talking about longevity at that point. That's like what's going to bring about much greater longevity. There was something else that I wanted to ask you, or not ask you, but talk about. I was on your website and I saw your page on the Sacred Hunt. And I read through that and I looked through that, and that, first of all, looks amazing. So awesome. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So let's do a data dump on what Sacred Hunt is. And I'm anxious to hear about your observations from people that have gone to it.
Yeah. Sacred Hunt started by a guy named Monsell Denton, who I met through Dr. Paul Saladino on a hunt with him. And it's something that he's really gravitated towards. I think he's been making a documentary for the last 3 years, basically on his goal started out as, and I know there's a few other people that contain the same goal, but he never wanted to buy grocery store meat again. He just wanted to hunt, and he would go without meat if he didn't have any.
You could not, man.
And so, he did this for a while, and now, he's got plenty of meat. He's handing it out to me every time he comes over. I'm like, hey man, I'm stocked up. But he had apprenticed under a guy who recently passed away named Dr. Will Tagle. And Dr. Will Tagle had apprenticed under a guy named Bearhart Williams. So his Native American elder really taught him how to come into right relation with himself and right relation with the land. And Monsell's bringing a lot of those core principles from Dr. Will Tagle to the land. And so really, from the moment you get there, you're in a ceremony. And, there's a million ways to hunt. I'm not pointing fingers at guys that do it different.
For sure.
Jump out of the.
Well, we're not here to talk about them. We're here to talk about you, man. Fuck those guys right now. We'll get to them, but right now, it's all about you.
And so, really the intention is set right when we get there, that the animals that are to be shot are done so in a humane way, that they don't take more than they need. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that means you got 7 guys on the hunt, we only bring back 2 animals. And it doesn't matter if we've paid for 1 animal each. Right. If that's what the land wants, that's what it's going to be.
Perfect.
And tobacco is used in the prayer. a lot of different things go into that. And Monsell has worked his way into working legally with certain plant medicines. And, of course, we're not out hunting when that takes place.
Of course.
But this, that is a part of the experience as well. And it's a beautiful part of the experience.
Interesting.
If you get a kill prior to entering that journey, you're going to come into contact with that animal on your journey.
No shit.
And if you haven't, that's an incredible way to pray for the animal you're going to take.
Yeah.
And it's, there's really nothing like it. I've been on several hunts without that component, but with that component, the deepest understanding takes place. And a lot of people, they're hanging out in Encinitas, in the full lotus and oming and meeting Christ consciousness and all this stuff. And it's awesome, good on you.
Yeah.
But to combine that with really the longest form of feeding and eating that humans have been a part of, pre-modern agriculture, pre-industry, that harmonizes us and connects us in a way to our food that nothing else can. Oh, man. So a lot of people talk like if you hunt, your appreciation for your food changes.
It so does.
You reconnect to something primal inside you that really, like a psychedelic experience, you can't explain that to the uninitiated. They don't fucking know. They have nothing to compare it to.
So true.
But you add these layers and components into it with really the expert and beautiful guidance from Monsell, who's a dear brother of mine. It can fundamentally change everything. It changes the way you look at food. It changes your relationship to nature. It changes your relationship to God, and all in a profound and beautiful way. So he's a one of a kind guy, and I'm looking forward. We've been so busy building this farm out in Lockhart this year that I told him I got no time for hunts this year, but we're gonna do another one in 2023.
Awesome.
And there's great places all over Texas. He's got quite a few different ranches that we go to. One of them we hunted out in a town called Hunt, Texas, like 2 hours west of Austin,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
And I think it was 1,500 or 2,000 acres. They had every type of animal there. So we had paid to hunt Aoudad, which is a northern African sheep or ram. And they have beautiful horns. They taste good. They're not like, I'm not a huge fan of whitetail, but
I know.
But they had everything on there. There was elk, like a big elk herd.
God,
there was a big bison herd. They had red stag from Argentina. It looked like fucking Harry Potter's Patronus. This thing looked magical,
Oh, dude.
It's taller than an elk with a huge rack. And of course, if you're not hunting them, you'll see them at 20 yards, right?
Yeah.
And then the Aoudad you never see.
Yeah, of course. So, he's like, how that works is it's still awesome.
Yeah.
You see everything
there's
but.
an innate intelligence, and the animals know if they're being hunted or not.
Yeah.
That's why you can see, the coolest one at 20 yards. But that experience of being amongst all these different types of animals, it really blew me away. My appreciation for Texas hunting, my appreciation for all of the animals this land had cultivated and how they had all figured out a way to work in harmony with one another. It's pretty powerful.
I think, one of the things that I grew up here in Texas. My dad wasn't a hunter, but we went hunting with a lot of his friends, and I got exposed to it from a pretty young age. And it was one of those things where I always appreciated, in some cases it could be referenced as a ceremony, but it was just the process, the process that everything goes through. And one of the things that you mentioned that I took away from that young age that still stays with me today is the prayer. And like that, it's hard to express to people that haven't been out there, but the prayer to me was like it was the connection, I suppose, or just like what I really I appreciated it from my perspective, and I hope the harvest also appreciated it as well. Like that was a way to show gratitude, appreciate what they did for my family, and I think I haven't really put as much effort into hunting since I've been back in Texas. That's on me. Simply, I make excuses about I'm just too busy. I got too much going on. I've got all this other stuff happening, and it's really been frustrating because I miss so much of that. I miss being connected with nature. I got so much of that from the Navy. Being out in the jungle and doing that work fulfilled that for me. And I would find peace when I would go out on my own on the weekends and go onto a fort and just walk the land and find, if I did, great. If I did, no big deal. I didn't it never was paramount that I always did well on my hunt. What was paramount was that I experienced the pleasure of being in the outdoors, the work that it takes to doing all of that. Like that's another thing that I think gets underestimated. So I love hearing about this. I was like, when I pulled up that page, I think I'd pulled it up before when we first started talking, and I just could not wait to talk about that one as well. So 2023, I'll definitely be texting you.
Hell yeah, brother.
Yeah, I'll be texting
Absolutely.
you a lot. That'll be a fun thing to do. Let's switch, if we can, and get into your podcasting, because as a fellow noob podcaster, I would like to really learn like some of your mistakes that you made along the way, and then what your successes were and how you discovered your successes. So
Yeah.
lay it on me, brother.
Yeah, I think early on, I kind of didn't have a voice. You know, it was just like I was starstruck in front of certain people. The very first podcast I had was with Kelly Starrett.
No
You know,
shit.
and he's a buddy, right? So he was like, yeah, man, I'll do it. Fuck yeah. I'll be the first guest, knowing like fucking 10 people were going to listen to it, right? And I went up there and like I might have said 5 words the entire 90 minutes.
No shit.
You know, just a lot of big smiles.
Yeah,
and head
yeah.
nods
I'm
and
doing the
like-
same thing on this end too. I'm like,
So it took me a minute to find my voice. And then when I did, I had so much to say, you know, at the cost of my guest.
Gotcha.
Right. And so, and I could recognize this certain podcasts that hear, you know, great hosts who I love. That's why I'm listening to their podcasts, have a little bit too much mic time. And so refinement comes in, you know, and everybody's going to find their balance, right? You've got Tim Ferriss, who, sorry, Tim, but is kind of like Barbara Walters. He's got great fucking questions.
Yeah.
He's better than Barbara in that way. He has great questions. He's a very intelligent guy who's well thought and well learned, and he's going to really bring the best out of his guest.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's also not, and he'll add stuff to the conversation, but it's not really a conversation, right? Then you got Rogan on the other side of the spectrum, where it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
And they're going to talk for hours,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the good shit's going to come to the surface,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they're going to have their conversation. And so there's nothing wrong with either style.
For
the
sure.
question is like, where do I feel best suited to draw the most out of my guest? It might mean we have equal airtime. It might not, right? There's podcasts that I've had where I've written out every fucking question for the guy.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
podcasts where I was like, I don't even know what we're going to talk about, but
Yeah.
it'll be cool.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and some of the ones where I'd written out every question, they sucked because I was too rigid in the format. Like I couldn't go with the flow of conversation. It
Right.
wanted to go a certain direction, and I was still stuck on, but I needed to ask you this next, right?
wrote
Let's
it
go
down,
back to
so it
this,
has
right?
to
Yeah,
happen.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then other conversations where, you know, the couple fails that I had were not really researching the guest enough to have good topics. And then after the fact, I was like, man, I fucking love that guy. What's he about?
Yeah, yeah.
I go read and I'm like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I should have asked him all these other things, you know? So laziness has been a factor earlier on for me. And, but you know, all of that's important.
Yeah.
Right. Because I know, you know, I can wing it with somebody that I know. I can't wing it with somebody I don't know.
Right.
I got to investigate.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means reading at least one of their books.
Yeah.
You know, start to finish.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of commitment.
It is.
So I better like the topic, right?
Yeah, right.
That kind of thing.
That's
if a
for
book
sure.
doesn't grab me, then it's really hard. But other times it can be, you know, just a buddy, and we're going to talk. Like I had Mark Bell back on. He's been on a number of times.
I like him.
Mark's a genius.
Yeah,
You know,
I like
he
him.
understands bodybuilding, powerlifting, fitness. He understands diet and nutrition. He understands so much. And he's just he's kind of a Renaissance man. You know,
I
he's
agree.
got some great views on reality, and
Absolutely.
and I love hearing him. So like that's just an easy ass. Yeah, man. Let me show you the farm. Let's hang out and podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think those are the learning curves through there. But the other thing that one of the realizations that I had was early on, I had questioned should I be asking these questions that are pertinent just for me? Will someone gain from it?
Oh, I see what
You
you're
know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Right? That
totally.
we talked about earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a little bit of stickiness where I was like, I'm not sure. And it took meeting some of the fans of the podcast. They'd bring up a certain episode and I'd be like, hey, between you and me,
Right.
did you have a problem with me asking these? And they're like, no, that fucking helped me out. I was wondering the same thing.
Yes.
Right? So, you know, if I'm curious about it and I know the guest, odds are other people are curious about that same thing.
100%.
You know, so
Yeah.
don't ever feel guilt around asking questions that
Good.
are 100% pertinent to you, because there's other people that are right there with you.
And I've tried, like, I'm trying to live that. I'm trying to help people live vicariously through me by being selfish in some cases and asking these questions that are more about me. I might get like I don't know, maybe down the road we do something where we let the listeners send in questions.
Yeah, Q&As are great.
Yeah, exactly. So we can do that. That's like we're being specific about the audience in sense. And I think that would be something to explore ourselves down the road. But I struggled with that at first. I was like, well, what do I talk to? What do I ask? And I'm like, well, this person brings value to me because they have information and knowledge that I don't have, and I want that. So that's what I've been trying to focus on. Is like, give me your why, help me to learn what you have accomplished, what you have done, and the mistakes along the way, because I'm a big proponent for, sometimes people put a negative cloud over failures, and some failures are really bad, but I try now to not be resistant to failures and look at failures as learning opportunities to help me move to the next step, or maybe, okay, that didn't work, let's just slide over here and go this way kind of thing. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that gave me, I had a hunch, and now I feel like, okay, good, we're on the right track. So awesome. What was like one of the big, I guess, like aha moments during the podcasting, that when you brought a guest on and you're talking and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, that is what? Tell me more, because I'm curious about
that actually happened. The hardest starstruck experience I've ever had was with Peter Crone. And, he's done a lot of stuff on Gaia TV. He's kind of like a Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's in that same league.
Okay.
And, he's, really alchemized a lot of spiritual wisdom from the East and the West, and harnessed it in a way that I think is very palpable for people. And he has a brilliant British accent, right?
Oh.
So I'm sitting on this guy's couch in LA, and it's a glorious fucking house. He comes down from his H-bot. He's got his own hyperbaric oxygen chamber upstairs, and he just floats down the stairs to the couch, and I'm looking at this guy, and I was like, fuck, man. Like, I could feel the nerves. And, this is years into podcasting.
Okay.
I've flown out on its dime to podcast with him. Like, we've already made it, in a sense. And, if you've got notes, or maybe you just have the threads in your head, but generally as a host where you're going to take the conversation, some important pieces to pick up. And that was the hardest podcast for me ever, because I was dumbfounded listening. Like, I was front row seat for the fight. I remember reffing a fight, and one of the guys was screaming at me, "Don't have front row seats. You got to ref. Don't have front row seats," right? And I was like, because I'm fucking just watching, like, damn, dude, this guy's about to get knocked the fuck out. And I'm just sitting there watching. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, it might be over. Is it over? Okay, it's not over. Oh shit, I'm gonna call it when the fight ends. So I had front row seats for Peter Crone, and he was saying some shit that was just blowing my mind, and I was just like, and the most awkward silences ever. Like, there's no single podcast that I've done that's had more awkward silence, and you probably wouldn't pick it up too much without watching the YouTube. But
okay.
Like, if there was we've got cameras from all angles here. I think we had one camera set up from the horizontal.
Yeah. If
there was one that was on my face. Yeah, you're just sitting there, drool coming out of my mouth, like, oh my God. Yeah, so that was one. And it's funny because I beat myself up about that podcast for a while after. And I had a guy, Chris Williamson, another Brit, on the podcast recently, and I don't know how it came up, but he talked about that. And he's like, the beautiful thing about podcasting is you do get to be a fly on a wall for an authentic conversation.
Yes.
And the more authentic that conversation is, the better.
Yeah.
Right? So fucking what?
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
man. Yeah, Peter caught you, right? Like, Peter, you were sucked into Peter for a minute.
You had that gravitational pull that just got you.
And that was the most authentic expression you had in that conversation. So like there was
nothing.
From a real standpoint, from a non, production. And it's funny because you got NPR and all the big leaguers now coming into the podcasting game and have been. And, they run these really tight, musically driven, beautiful shows, and they're it's like TV. Yeah. It's almost a little too canned.
Yes.
And it's not to say like I won't listen to them or things like that, but there's a difference between
authenticity.
Yeah, the real conversation where you're like, man, I was in the room with these guys. I feel like I know them now.
Oh, dude, man, I'll tell you two things real quick. It's so funny you mentioned Peter and his British accent, because yesterday there was a crew from the UK that travels around. They were traveling around Texas for the last 2 weeks. A British crew. There's a similar program here in the States, Veterans for Jiu-Jitsu, or Jiu-Jitsu for Veterans, I think it is. I'm sorry, Joey, if I got that wrong. But there's a similar sister organization out from the UK, and so they came in here. So yesterday's noon class, there was like 15 of them. And like, I'm just sitting there, like, I'm listening to their accent. I'm just like grinning. I'm like, what are you grinning at? Nothing. I love your accent. It's just so awesome. And so of course I got pounded by guys with British accents, but it was awesome. So I kind of flashed back to yesterday when you said that, because that cool accent does kind of do something. And then the second thing is like, what I took away from that's the starstruckness that you mentioned is, again, just a mirror into how authentic that podcast episode was, because you were at that point where it was like, wow. And I'm sure I've had a couple with you today. I had a couple with some of the other guys we've had so far, and that's kind of like the that's what I'm most excited about. Is like, yeah, it might be awkward. I might look like an ass. I might have drool coming out of my mouth. I might just be like cockeyed here in a sense. But those are the moments that I'm looking forward to, because that's, I think, where you're really on the cusp. Like learning is taking place. There's information that you're just digesting, and you're just like, oh, give it to me. Like I feel like, just like all of it's coming at you at one time. So sorry to step away from the mic, Paul. Sorry about that. But yeah, so those help me feel good. Like I'm like, okay, that's going to happen. Cool. It's no big deal. It actually just helps to, relay how authentic that exchange was, and, move on. Okay. So one final question. We're going to start wrapping things up here. The question that I like to leave with is, what do you want our listeners to learn? What was the factoid that not factoid per se, but like the information that you want to leave the listeners? Like, if you had to put your finger on one thing, what would that be?
It reminds me of one of Tim Kennedy's, one of his latest tweets, that no one's going to save you. No one's going to protect you. No one's going to feed you. No one's going to wipe your ass.
Yes.
I'm paraphrasing, of course, but you are the one, right? You're the one that's going to do that for you. And I think the sooner we come to that realization, the greater the responsibility we have over our lives, but also the greater freedom in what we do with it.
So true.
Yeah. And I think from a reading standpoint, I have a lot of friends from high school that they're like, I'm good. I don't need to read anything else. They throw on the game, have a beer after work, those kind of things. And that's cool if you just want to tread water, but I like the advancement of, and the newness. We're all seeking novelty, right? So there is newness and a new topic that's exciting me. There's novelty in learning things and then trying them out, right? So I think once that shift happened, in fighting for me, that fundamentally changed my life forever. And it happened with Paul Chek's book, but really it's just that. It doesn't need to be a book on diet, and that's the other thing that I have a lot of people that come through Fit for Service. They might, come through a summit for 5 days and have 40 books, where they're like, these are the things you need to read for X, Y, and Z from between all the 5 coaches. And so we get asked, like, how do I process this? Which one do I start with? And the truth is, it's what is most alive in you right now? Like, where is the burning desire? Because that's the book you're going to finish. That's the one you're actually going to try out, right? Yeah. It's not the one you should read, right? It's not like the healthy food that you should be eating, right? So when you have an authentic desire to learn it, follow that. And when that trail runs dry, follow the next trail. And just keep going that way, because there is so much more that I never expected in life because of that little spark in there that says, fuck yeah, there's something I want to dive into.
So I'll tell you a quick little story here real quick. Like the mention of the folks from high school that, I don't need to read anymore. I don't want to read anymore. I was like that. I mean, totally. You described me right there. I was like, damn it, he did it again. But, reading was not hard for me, but I didn't value it when I was younger. I read when it was necessary in the Navy, because I'd have to read a manual. I'd have to read a checklist. I'd have to read all this other stuff, whatever. But I never really chose to expand my knowledge through reading until probably about, honestly, if I'm being honest with myself, about 6-7 years ago. What I mean by that is then I started digesting books on a regular basis. And I think what happened to me is I would get into I always fell into the trap. What if I don't like this book? I'm going to invest all this time, because it takes me, I have to reread paragraphs sometimes. I have to back up a couple paragraphs if I took a break from a couple days. So reading is not necessarily easy for me, but I put the work in to do it. And so I was always like, oh, fuck, man. Why do it? Because I'm just whatever. And like we were talking about earlier, consistency is the key. And like I now have every third day, I have time set aside for me just to read. And what I've learned is that don't try to value the information. Don't try to assess a value on the information.
How much am I getting out of this?
Exactly, right. Don't try to do that, because then you're already walking into it with a failed mindset of sorts. Instead, just read it. And if you didn't get anything valuable from it, well, that's valuable. And then if you did get something valuable, that's great. And I've really tried to make that, and that right there has just freed me up. Just say, fuck it, let's just start reading. And I'd probably not digested as many books as you are, but one of my goals that I've set forth for me personally is, okay, I spent like maybe 15, 20 years not reading. I got a lot of catching up to do. A lot of catching up to do.
Well, I'll tell you, and for anybody else that's jumping in the podcast game, reading expands your ability to have conversation, right? Like that's just first and foremost. Like I consider myself being paid to read because of the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm paid to read because of Fit for Service and coaching people.
Yes.
I'm paid to. I mean, I had a vision on some mushrooms one time where I actually ate a book and then vomited it into the microphone, and that went out into people's ears. And I was like,
that'd make a great portrait for your podcast. You know, that would
be fucking rad.
Yeah, it would be cool. We know some artists that could do that.
That'd be dope.
Yeah,
dude, for sure.
Yeah,
but yeah, you know, like so understanding that, like, what broadens your ability to take it to any new topic.
Yeah,
right. And if you care about it, right, if that authentic aliveness is there, then that's gonna stick.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a big component. Don't just read it because you have to. Like, read it because you want to, and then you actually expand whatever your capabilities are.
That was a big thing for me. I started reading, instead of reading fiction and whatnot, I started reading books that would help me be a better instructor. And that's what started it. It's like, okay, you know what? I need to improve my game. And so I started reading books. And at first, they were books that were kind of exclusive to the firearms industry, but there's not a lot in a sense. And then I just started like opening up the floodgates and just started going. And I'm in areas, I'm reading books that I'm like, man, dude, this has nothing to do with the industry, but yet I can connect dots, and I can see the value of bringing this into what I'm doing. So I've had a major philosophical shift in my brain as far as like now reading is not a chore. Like it used to be a chore to me when I was going through school, and even college, it used to be a chore. And now reading is joy. Reading is something that I will, like, I shut the world out. This is my time. Give me 15 minutes. Just leave me alone. So, all right. Well, where can people learn more about you, the podcast, all the other things that you're involved with?
Yeah, check out the Kyle Kingsbury podcast, anywhere where podcasts are at, and fitforservice.com if you want to come to our events, see what it's all about. We've got, a lot of cool stuff that's in the works right now.
And that's the one that you're doing with Aubrey, right?
Yeah, it's
cool.
Me, Aubrey,
right
and a couple others. His wife, Ilana, Eric Godzi, I mentioned, and Caitlin Howe. It's just a phenomenal team. And we bring in experts from all over the world. Dr. Zach Bush is going to be a speaker at our next event. Charles Eisenstein, who's an incredible thinker in today's world, much needed thinker in today's world. He'll be there speaking. So I get to, learn so much at each one of these events that I'm coaching at, that it's like really like a self-serving thing that just flows every single time I'm there. So
that's awesome.
It's a great way to meet up, to get coaching, to be able to experience a lot of the stuff that we're talking about hands-on. And yeah, man, it's been great. It's been great being on the podcast with you. You're a natural.
Dude, well, thank you, first of all. I really appreciate it. All right, folks. Well, that's a wrap. I want to thank Kyle, first of all, for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. That means a lot to me. Thank everybody that's tuning in. Thank our sponsor, and those folks that are holding the line. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. You've been listening to the Bulletproof Workshop podcast. Until then, take care and stay safe. Adios, everyone.